Hi, so today I'm gonna be trying to show you how to do some proper shading. So, so let's get started. So first we're gonna start with what we're shading. So I'm just gonna do a cylinder. So you draw kind of a rough outline. You don't want it to be too dark. You don't want to press down the pencil like that. You want to kind of be really gentle, really sketchy with it. And like you can clean it up if you feel like it needs to be a bit more defined. But yeah, you don't want to do it really dark. You kind of want to do it real fine sketch lines, not pressing hard, just kind of brushing the pencil over the paper, which is going to come into play with the shadowing. So a little exercise that I learned in art class is a good way to do it. So you start with the darkest color that you can possibly get, and you gradually move away from it. And you want to gradually get lighter. So, what's that? That's called a value scale. So you'll be able to see it slowly gets lighter or darker depending on which way you go. And the lighter you move your pencil on the paper, the lighter it's going to get. And the more times you layer on, the darker it's going to be, or the harder you press down your pencil. But you don't want to press down super hard the whole time because, it kind of messes with it just a little bit, as you can see here. You want to kind of do a really even transition, which, means going back in, doing more layers in certain spots to kind of give it more value, to give it more. So, yeah, always a good idea to practice a value scale, maybe like in a corner. So, we want to remember the value scale, and we're going to bring it over to this little cylinder that we've made. So, shadowing, you need to kind of figure out where you want the light to be coming from. So, I'm going to have the light coming from this direction. So, it's coming this way, kind of like the way it is right now with my lamp. The shadow is on this side because the light's coming from this direction. So because it's coming from this direction, you know that this side is going to have the most shading. So you want to have the darkest shading the farthest away from the light source, and you gradually get lighter, which means you go from the harder or more layered strokes of the pencil to lighter, less strokes. And it's always okay to come in with a pencil and kind of lighten it up just a bit. And I'll show you where that's going to come into play later. But also, we're going to say it's coming from more of an upward direction instead of just from the side. So it's coming in kind of at this angle. So there's going to be the shadowing here, but there's also going to be some slight shadowing underneath where that's kind of hidden. So there's going to be kind of a angled shadow almost. And that's just going to, get lighter. And a lot of times artists will use like their fingers to kind of smudge it, kind of give it a bit more of a smooth shadow, kind of make it look a bit smoother. Sometimes art teachers aren't really fond of that and they'll say not to do that. Sometimes artists will use like a piece of tissue paper to do that. Sometimes I use like a little Q-tip. But because it's coming from this angle, there's not really going to be much shadow up here. So, not really going to have to worry about that. Might want to add like a little something, like at the top. Just because the shadow, especially like with objects in real life, there's not a defined, well, piece of paper isn't really a good example, but like this eraser, there isn't like a black line right here to show you where there's a cutoff. In real life, you don't have the black lines like you do on a cartoon. So, shadows provide that line. So, that's why you don't need to do the thick lines with the pencil when you're drawing it. Because when you draw it sketchy, the shadows are going to be what you use to make that more defined line. So we've shaded this cylinder here. We've given it depth. Now what we have to do, because it's not just floating in space, we have to kind of give it a shadow underneath. Because objects make shadows, like this eraser, because the light is shining onto it from this direction, it produces a shadow down here. Same with the pencil, or with my hand, which is kind of harder to see. So what you do is you take into account where the light's coming from. So it's coming from this direction, so you know the shadow's gonna kind of be over here. So, sometimes I like to kind of draw a little sketch of what it looks like, because it's gonna kind of mirror the image that you're drawing. So if we're like drawing a cube, you're not gonna have a circular shadow, because the cube's not producing a circular shape. Same way with the eraser. With the eraser, because it's kind of got a rectangle shape to it, it produces a similar shadow. So with the cylinder, it's kind of easier because it almost produces a circular shape, but it has kind of like a defined shape, defined lines here because of the shape of the body. So the shadow is going to be thickest here, closer to the object, where the light has less reach. And the shadow gradually gets lighter the further it gets. Sometimes, like in real life, you don't really have that same thing because, as you can see with the pencil, it's not as, the light's more focused, so there isn't room for a gradual fade. I mean, in some cases, like here with the shadow of my hand, you've got more of that, like here. Because my hand isn't flat on the table, on the paper, like pencil is, it's got more of a gradual fade to it almost, which is kind of what you're going to do with shading here. And of course, I'm kind of using my finger to blend it a bit. But, yeah, so you see, the shadow kind of makes that prominent line. So, that's the basic of shading, especially like a shape. And you just kind of apply the same technique to other things like a cube or even like a prism, because those exist. But yeah, value scale, going from the darkest you can possibly get, gradually getting lighter and lighter. A good way to practice that is to set up a number line. So typically you have 1 through 7, or sometimes 1 through 9. So 9 is, or 7, whichever you want to do, is going to be the darkest color. 1 essentially is supposed to be pure white, so like the lightest color you can possibly get. And you're going to go and make each shade, going from 1, you're going to make it gradually darker. If you're going up from 1, it's going to gradually get darker. If you're going down from 9, it's going to gradually get lighter. So that's a good little way to practice it, going up and down a value scale. So going dark to light, going light to dark. So that's always a good little way to practice, and it really does help with shading. Remember, don't draw your objects with really dark lines, because that defeats the purpose of shading. You want to draw it real sketchy, real light, almost faded, like you can't really see it, because the shadows are going to come in and kind of form that solid line, especially the shadows that you add in that give it depth, because you're not drawing something that's floating in space. You're giving it a shadow, you're giving it depth. You're saying this is sitting on something, light is coming from this angle, and it produces a shadow. So, yeah. So that's doing it from this angle. Another thing that you might need to do is producing it, say it's coming directly at it. So the light is coming straight at it. So in that case, if the light is coming right at it, so say my pencil is the light is coming right at it, it's not coming from the side, it's not coming from above, it's going right at it. That means that since the light's going to be right on it, the middle here, where I just kind of marked it with the eraser, that's going to be completely white, or as light as you can possibly get it, because that's where the light's shining. So you come in from the sides, kind of practice that value scale, you gradually get lighter. And you're going to do that on both sides, right? And of course, I kind of use my little technique to fade it, blend it a bit. A lot of teachers don't really like it when you do that, because it takes away some of the skill that you need. So you're going to kind of do that over and over till you feel like you've got the right layers and everything, till you feel like the sides are dark enough. So, it kind of looks weird, but you're going to take your eraser and you're kind of just going to lightly erase the middle to give it that kind of lighter part where the light's coming directly on it. And a lot of people, they'll take the eraser and they'll make a solid little white spot there. And that's always a thing you can do. So, because it's coming right at it, it kind of would suggest that, the object isn't really getting the same amount of lighting on the top, but the farthest away from the light is going to have the darkest shadow. So you want to make sure that you do that. And of course, if you go and you smudge it to blend it, you can always take the eraser to kind of fix up little spots, to do all that. But for the sake of it, we'll say that the top is just one solid color. And you can always take an eraser, clean up the edges, lighten it up if you need to. But because the light's coming right at it, you're kind of going to have a weird shadow that comes behind it. And you're, of course, kind of going to try and keep the shape of the object. And it's going to be darkest here, and it's going to gradually fade the further away from the object you get. Also, going to do a similar thing going upward. So like that. Which isn't really the best example. I'm sure a well-taught art teacher could give a better example. But that's basically it. And what I'm doing right now is just kind of filling it in. So this is the space around it. So because the light's directly on this object, the space around it is going to be darker. Because the farther away from the light you are, the darker it's going to be. That's what it is here. Because this little corner here is on the opposite side of where the light's hitting, it's darkest. So because, like with this, you've got the light right here, the area behind it and around it, it's going to gradually get darker. So like out here is definitely going to be darker than right here. But at the same time, it's all shadow. And that creates a sense of depth, which is what shading is essentially all about. And I know this kind of looks crappy, but that's pretty much all there is to it. So, you got shading. You don't always have to draw the little arrows. You just need to get a sense of where the light's coming from. Decide, this is where the light's coming from. This arrow, for the moment, is going to represent the light. Where it's coming from, the right direction it's going, all that jazz. And then you're going to shade accordingly. Meaning the side or the corner that's the farthest from where the light's hitting is going to be the darkest. And it's going to gradually get lighter the closest to the light source it gets. So I hope that helped. I hope that anyone seeing this is learned something. So yeah. And if someone would like to, I can always do more videos, kind of like little tutorials, for things like shading, drawing. I'm not the best, so don't quote me on this stuff. But yeah, so that's it for this video. If you want more, please comment down below or email me. My email is on my channel. Yeah, happy art time and happy drawings. Bye now.